The Cottonwood boardroom is muted. We can't hear anything from the Cottonwood boardroom.
I can hear you, Vinny.
I can hear you too, Harry. I can't hear the Cottonwood room.
I can't hear them.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me at all, Vinny?
Yeah, we can now.
Or,
Thank you.
Good to go.
Okay, good. You can hear me also, I assume, Vinny?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Sorry, the mic may not have been picking me up there. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Anyways, once again, thank you, David, for the good observation. I'd like to, if it's okay with everybody, if everyone's comfortable with this, I would prefer to go by first names. It's a lot easier. It moves a lot smoother. It's not quite as formal. So if everybody's good with that, I'm looking around, I'm seeing nodding heads. Just want to make sure everybody's on board with me. Good, thank you. Wonderful. Yeah, the next thing we're going to do now is the approval of the minutes for the May 13th, 2021 CPAC meeting. Hopefully everybody's had a good opportunity to review them, and if you caught anything that needs to be corrected, please let us know. And do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of May 13th, 2021.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, and Jim seconds that. Any discussion? Any corrections? Anything that jumped out at you? Very well, I'll ask the question then. All in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by raising your hand. Looks like it's unanimous. Is there anyone who doesn't approve? Okay. Okay, moving right along, we have our new business. First up, item number 5, discussion and approval of survey questions for the cost of development, water resources, transportation, open space, growth area, and land use elements, and also a couple other things were thrown in there. And I believe that one of the committee members had a question about that.
I do. Thank you, Chairman. Dave, are these subjects that we're going to discuss, are they all required by the state?
Most of them are. What is not required by the state are the additional ones I've got at the end for dark sky, food sustainability, and disaster sustainability. Those are not specifically enumerated in state law. I really believe those actually, those surveys will actually end up inside of the other elements. I think we'll see probably dark sky under environmental or land use. We'll see disaster under a land use. Food is probably going to be mixed in there somewhere with growth and land use as well. But yes, the first 6 of there are required under Arizona state law.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a way to get others added, something like workforce housing? I mean, I think there's some other key issues that should be addressed
Yes.
by the county.
Yeah, we can absolutely add more in. That was part of what I wanted our discussion today to be about,
Okay.
to see what those other, sorry, it sounds like we keep dropping out on the mics here for some reason. Or maybe I'm just hearing things. But that's part of what I'd like out of our discussion today, is to see what else we can add in there. Workforce housing, I think, is important. I think that's one we can definitely add in. We'd not previously talked about that in the past, but I think that's a good one to go ahead and add in. And then just for the record, for the minutes, it's 10:08, and we've had our 2 remaining members join us. Oh,
And welcome. Good to see you here. You didn't miss much.
you haven't missed much at all.
So John,
Okay,
I guess you got a
thanks.
question?
Yes, I had a comment. I'm concerned about, as far as these surveys go, about the process that we're using to conduct these countywide surveys. Right now, as I understand the process, step 1 is having the planning department staff make a list of questions. Step 2, present those questions to the advisory committee for editing. And then step 3, post the survey online. My concern is that in doing these surveys, we're formulating and posting the surveys without asking inputs from any Yavapai County residents. My understanding is the purpose of the surveys is to determine what concerns and issues, what things that the residents of Yavapai County would like to see in our comprehensive plan. I don't see that we're getting any input in that regard. As far as conducting surveys, a professional poll taker will typically go through several steps. First of all, they'll collect a wide range of inputs from residents across the county. That's typically done through some kind of a focus group, something like that. So you're collecting a lot of questions. Secondly, you create a questionnaire of those questions and you present it to a test group. In other words, run it through a test process, and people then tell you, well, I don't understand this question, or, you know, can you reword that, or whatever. Only after you've done that do you then give it to the actual people who are taking the survey. And the idea then is not, the survey is not to determine what concerns are important to the residents. It's to determine how widespread each of those concerns is. You've got a list of concerns, and you want to take a poll of the entire county to find out, is this just one small group? But that's not the way we're conducting our surveys. We're not starting with community input. So that's my concern.
Okay. I'll be happy to address that. We've got to start somewhere. Yavapai County has 250,000 residents in it, over 8,000 square miles. It is impossible for staff to go through, poll every community, try to obtain consensus just to get a survey going. We've got to get something going now so we can at least start the discussion. And that's what this is intended to do. It's intended to start the discussion, not be the end of the discussion.
But in the first survey that you conducted, which went very well, you had hundreds of people at least responding to it, you started off by sending out to the public about 10, 12 questions. Then the public jumped on that, and you had inputs, especially from Keep Sedona Beautiful and Village of Oak Creek. A lot of people got involved. You ended up going from about 10 questions to about 37 questions, okay? You then put that online. You got good responses. I think you had a lot of questions in there that regarded issues of concern to people, and that's why you had such a good response. That process was, I think, prematurely terminated. In other words, you quickly went from just the inputs from those groups to putting it online. We didn't see enough input from the western half of the county. And I've communicated with one person who was on the Williamson Valley Committee, and I can quote from his email: Williamson Valley is stalled in its efforts to respond to the county request for a community vision statement. Williamson Valley already has a community plan that was published in 2009. That plan involved over 500 individuals working for more than 5 years to develop. However, the county decided that it did not want any more plans developed at the community level. We decided that our best approach would be to participate in the development of surveys with the county and then prepare an updated community vision statement based on the survey results and a comparison to our previously published plan. However, the county's initial survey to support community vision statement development was posted, despite the fact that almost all the communities asked for it to be improved before posting. When that happened, most of the Williamson Valley people who had previously expressed interest lost interest and said they were wasting their time on the project. The remaining group is still interested in surveying its residents and updating our community plan. However, due to the limited number of people, there is limited action being taken at this time. Our current efforts have been limited to development of new maps of our area to identify segments of the valley having local concerns. So I also had a comment from a Big Park committee member. A big question among our members is the lack of a plan for broad distribution of these surveys across the county. We don't see evidence of a critical level of participation beyond Sedona, thanks to KSB, and VOC, thanks to Big Park Council. Without a robust response from residents countywide, how can the county possibly accrue enough responses to have their surveys be meaningful? So those are the concerns that I've received from people who participate in the process.
Thanks, John. If I could jump in real quick.
Please.
Obviously, this committee is serving at the pleasure of the Board of Supervisors. That's why we're here. We're their platform to help them develop whatever they're going to put forward with their name stamped on it, essentially. And I think part of this process is a relatively tight timeline, if I'm not mistaken. David, do you have? I don't want to throw a question to you that you're not prepared to answer, but do you have the timeline there?
Absolutely.
Okay, please.
Our timeline is to have this to the Board of Supervisors by October of 2022. We are already currently, since the formation of this committee, we're already currently 2 months behind our published schedule. We do have a public participation plan that has already been approved by the Board of Supervisors. And I want to be clear, the Community Vision Statement Survey was for the community's benefit. It was not for the county's benefit. It was to try to engage the individual communities. I can speak specifically to Williamson Valley, and Williamson Valley elected not to participate, pushed back on the process, and did not participate in any meaningful manner. We had to move forward. They were directed to move forward with their own surveys. Our survey instrument was designed to be an additional tool for those communities, not the only tool for those communities. Big Park, I know, did their own survey. Several other communities have done their own surveys. So that tool is a community tool that we tried to put together to help start those communities going. It was never intended to be a tool for the county-wide to be used for the comprehensive plan. It was designed to get the individual communities engaged. And we've had some communities engaged, we've had some communities that have not. And that's unfortunate, but we can only lead the horse to water, so.
Thank you, David. So anyways, I think we're trying to maintain a fine balance between community representation and providing a solid product for the Board of Supervisors to further their work, so.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have both hats on as a committee member and a supervisor, and do a little King Solomon work, if I may, on our behalf. And it has to do with the question of, is there any reason why we can't ask for that data from Williamson Valley now? If they have a survey, they value it, they are doing an insular process, can we not integrate that information and move along?
And if I may, we have already told every community we are happy to post their individual surveys and their individual community plans on our website so that it is accessible. They don't have to host it on their own websites. We can go ahead and take that on for them. The Williamson Valley Community Plan that they referred to was approved by the Board of Supervisors in 2000 and I believe it was 10. And the very next meeting, area plans county-wide were put under moratorium. And there was no interest at all in moving forward or recognizing those plans. So, it's something that has been an issue, but at this point, that was over a decade ago. I would argue at this point, given the growth and everything, that plan is no longer valid or viable. It needs to be looked at moving forward to the future.
But there are survey instruments that they have filled out in Williamson Valley. Is that what I'm understanding, Mr. Chairman?
It's my understanding that is correct. And I'm watching David, he's nodding his head yes.
That's what I understand as well, but since they stepped away from the table on the community vision, they have not communicated with us. I've received no communication from Mr. Fortney for, the last 3 months.
Out of an abundance of willingness to engage in good faith, is there any way we could yet, once again, without delaying our process as we're moving forward, respectfully request that they provide that information, because we do honor what they have to say and want it to be reflected in the process as we go forward.
I'd be happy to reach out to Mr. Fortney for that. And he is on our mailing list, as are all the members of the Williamson Valley Community Organization. They're on our mailing lists. So everything that's gone out on the CPAC MailChimp list over the last few weeks is going to all of them. So.
And then just one more footnote to that, Mr. Chairman. And Dave, I know I can't recall when you and I are going to be at Verde Village, but soon.
The date just changed. I believe we're coming up next month. I believe it's going to be in August.
Oh, it's been delayed to August.
I'd have to verify my calendar.
I can't keep up anymore either. It's relatively soon, and the reason that I'm bringing that out is to say it's really never too late. These are folks who, for the most part, for whatever reasons, have been left out of the conversation, and they're actually, in many cases, going to fill out a hard copy survey, and we're going to be there collecting it and then asking for any more inputs from them and integrate it into our process. And that's due to occur, I guess, in the first part of August. So it is not too late, in other words.
Not at all. Not at all. And as I've said from the beginning, all of these surveys are staying online for the duration. We have cleaned up the data glitches that we had in the initial Community Vision Statement survey. We have reposted that survey on, so there's another instrument out there that's still collecting, information out there. They're welcome to continue to use that. But all of these are going to stay on through the duration of the plan, so that if we get a comment in that 11th hour, we can integrate that comment in. If there's something that somebody comes up with, or we have a legislative change or something else, we're able to address that.
Okay, so this is not the end-all, be-all that we're discussing.
Not
today.
at all.
We're just working with what we have in front of us.
To get the discussion going.
Right, just to get the discussion
Exactly.
going. John, you had one more comment you wanted to make?
Yes, in talking to these various people, I understand that the Cornville Community Association, Keep Sedona Beautiful, and the Sustainability Alliance have submitted to you vision statements. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I would like to see copies of those vision statements. I think it would provide very useful input in terms of my decision-making ability and so forth. Are you planning to distribute those to the committee?
I believe those are already on our website. I am taking a peek right now. And we have, I have the Cornville Vision Statement, Keep Sedona Beautiful, and I have the Verde Valley Food Council Community Vision Statements already on our website under Community Documents.
Darcy Hitchcock of Sustainability Alliance said she submitted one but had never heard any kind of acknowledgement, and she was wondering if that's normal.
I would have acknowledged if I had received that, so I'm wondering if that didn't get caught in the county's spam or danger filters when it came in.
We'll check into that then.
Okay.
Great. Now, so anyways, moving right along, I think that next up is to go ahead and review these current survey questions as identified. Why don't we go ahead and start with cost of development?
Thank you very much. So the questions we've provided here, again, they are designed to get the discussion going, not be the be-all, end-all. Are there any topics under cost of development that we have missed that should be included in on this initial round? That's really what we're looking for right now, not necessarily wordsmithing the individual questions, but what are any additional topics related to the cost of development element that we could add in or address? And cost of development is intended to be, and we'll have all the explanation on the survey when we do it, but it's intended to be a cost sharing of development with individual developers. What should individual developers be paying for based on their increased demand for services, transportation networks and those types of things? What should the individual developer be paying for versus what should the county or other jurisdictions be paying for within those areas? So.
And I have one question / comment on all of these. Will the people who respond to the survey, will they be able to also include any comments that they have?
Yes,
additional comments?
in each of these, we will have a free-form question at the end.
Oh, okay, good.
So that any additional topics, anything else can be automatically put in. We've already built that in.
Okay, John, I think you had a question?
On the free form, we found when Keep Sedona Beautiful conducted their survey, they included a free-form question at the end, and quite often that opens up the possibility of new questions. People bring up a concern that was never on that survey. Are you planning to have follow-up surveys, like a survey number 2 on the cost of development,
Yes.
where you would put those questions in?
Yes, we are. That'll be one of those follow-up. That's where I'm hoping to actually capture that data. In the GIS analysis, we can do keyword search, kind of a keyword mapping, so we can see out of, if I get 500, I can see based on the size of the word, which keywords are hitting more frequently than others. We can identify those trends pretty easily in those free-form fields. So,
Well, as I mentioned before, the purpose of the survey really is to find out how widespread a concern is. So when one person mentions a concern in the free-form section, it's important to know whether that's broadly felt.
yes. Yeah, and we'll be expanding on all of those.
I have a question, David. Mary?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. David, I have a question about if we can go into the questions, and I actually have a few, but reading through this, the first question, does the county keep track of the problem areas or the complaints? For example, if you get a complaint, the same complaint maybe 3 times, does it go on a list in somebody's book somewhere to keep track of that so we actually know what the complaints are?
Well, what type of complaints are we?
Well, it says, do you think the county is able to respond adequately to citizens' needs and concerns?
Yes.
If
What we're talking about here is going to be for multiple potential departments. This would be a public works issue. This would be a county health issue. This would be a development services issue. To me, that's kind of drilling down into, do we even have an issue with customer service on this level, or are we okay?
I
We can
guess I'm
certainly
asking-
drill down and name some departments in this, kind of a checkbox.
But does somebody keep track of that?
I know in development services we do.
Okay.
I look for trends on zoning applications, use permit requests especially, because use permits are people coming in asking for things that we don't already have codified. We look for trends in that. So if I see 5 applications or 3 applications come in where people need an 800 square foot guest house instead of a 750, we start scratching our head going, are we doing the right thing by having that limitation? Same thing with code enforcement complaints. We start seeing trending where, hey, we got a lot of weeds in one area all of a sudden. What's going on here? Has the rain missed this area? Everything's drying out. We have fire danger. How do we best address that? So from my department's point of view, we do look at those. We do kind of track and look at the trending of what we're seeing in the day-to-day operations.
So there's somebody in your department that keeps track of that specifically?
We can do that through our
Like a collective?
Yes,
Okay.
we can do that through our software.
And then on number 2, again, just for the broader understanding of why we're here today, the number 2 question, should the county seek more grants and national funding to help incentivize new development? My first thought was, is the county attempting to get into the development business? I mean, is the county looking for development because of the trends today with the very fast pace that every municipality in the county is growing? Is the county specifically looking to be in the development business?
No.
Okay.
Not unless the Board of Supervisors wishes to direct me differently. But I can tell you that the county is always in a mindset to find alternate funding sources for things, just to be better stewards of our local taxpayer dollars.
Well, could that sentence be better versed? Does anybody else feel the same way about that sentence? To me, it implies that the county is trying to get into developing.
Well, it kind of appears to be a question to me, and it's a should question.
Mm-hmm.
Question whether they should or not. That's just the way I interpret it when I read it. But I have another question real quick. In terms of all 7 of the questions under cost of development, are these available to the public? Anyone watching who's tuning in on WebEx or wherever, can they see where?
The staff report right now, I don't know if it is available to the public online or not.
Well, the reason I ask is this something that I should or somebody should be reading each of the questions individually as we cogitate them, or for the benefit of the public?
We're certainly welcome to do so, but I don't believe there's any requirement for us to.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure nobody's left in the dark.
Yeah. The requirement is to provide an agenda online, not individual staff reports and other items. But
yeah, John, I saw you flashing your
Yes,
hand again.
it kind of comes back to my previous issue of are we involving the public in coming up with these? And in a sense, the normal second step after compiling a bunch of questions would be to give it to a test group and let them comment about what's confusing or what their reactions to it. So we're sort of the test group, I guess.
Yes, you are the test group for this.
All right. So, for example, question 1, do you think the county is able to adequately respond to citizen needs and concerns? Needs and concerns seems very vague to me. I don't know how I would answer that question. And so it's the wording of the question. Question 3, should the county seek more private partnerships to develop and address problem sites within the county? I'm not sure what problem sites means. Question 4, should the county try to purchase sites to try to develop them in the future?
I had that was my next question also.
I don't know how to answer
Is
that.
the county willing to do a partnership with, theoretically a developer that would come in? How it infers that the county is willing to become and partner in some kind of a development.
This to me is a direction type question. I think this is questions we don't have answers to, whether the public would support, this type of thing. I think it's really kind of reaching out to provide that information to the Board of Supervisors to see, is this a program area we need to start looking at? Obviously, right now, any developer can come in for any reason and issue and request a development agreement where we have a mixed public-private type partnership on a development. Now, we do exceedingly few development agreements. They've really kind of fallen out of favor, but anybody has a right to come in and ask for anything they wish. Whether they get it or not is another matter.
But as a
Let me,
developer,
if I may, raise a potential example for just to noodle, just for sake of discussion and thinking. So we all know that Friends of the Verde and the Verde Front, which I serve on as well, are deeply involved in how do we preserve our diminishing water resources and our lifeblood of the state, the Verde River, from Big Chino, Little Chino to the headwaters and so on. And so one of the things that is wonderful to consider, and perhaps this is the right place for us to have that discussion, is the incentivizing of a development that provides sustainability, or better yet, regenerative approaches, whether it's an individual homeowner, whether it's a development community that would be using water. And so this might be an opportunity where there is an incentive to do the right thing, and then the discussion becomes, what would that incentive be? And I think that's left to case by case perhaps, or a broad policy such as if you're preserving or protecting or recharging the Verde River and whatever this development project is, there's some value realized for doing so. So to me, this discussion covers two things: incentivizing sustainable regenerative development processes, and is this the right place to have under the heading cost of development those points, and what do we mean by incentivizing and value? And those are much broader challenges, questions to try to address.
but would the county be interested in specifically financially partnering with people, or is it basically an incentive with a much smaller incentive, such as maybe, an exclusion of the permit cost? Or, I mean, as a person in the construction industry, when I read this kind of verbiage, it's inferring that the county is willing to get into a development agreement with a developer. So if it's an incentive, if you're incentivizing, I think we need to be clear about how you're incentivizing, because it's such an open.
In the shortest answer I can give, there would be no way for me to create a survey that we could even look at to say what kind of incentives should we provide.
Right.
It is absolutely on a case-by-case basis, and we have to take any potential incentives and compare those with Arizona state gifting statutes, with case law out there as far as what the public benefit may or may not be. And I can see,
board approval.
and most definitely board approval. But before it would even get to the board, we've got to look at whether the legality of the situation is even allowed. And then from there, I also look at this question in a different context, and that is, should we incentivize the private partners in the form of, Verde Water, looking at some of these other groups to say maybe they need some funding at budget time to help their mission, which provides a direct positive benefit to the county. This is a very nebulous question, but I think it's one we've got to get out there to say, is there any interest in this? Or should we roll the tax dollars back? Should that be a recommendation instead? It's just trying to get that discussion going and then drill down to later on, what should this look like, when we have a little better scope. But development agreements can be for almost anything. It doesn't have to be necessarily financial. Developers can see positive financial benefits on their side without the expenditure of county tax dollars.
For example, they might come to a particular, and pardon me, I forgot to ask permission to speak. I got excited. It's a topic near and dear to me. Here's an opportunity where value can be realized. And so I think, as David said, and I said prior to his statement on it, it has to be a case-by-case basis. And of course, go through a process of approval statutorily and then, of course, clearance-wise, and then approval of the board. But imagine, if you will, that we begin to attract certain development relative to, for example, for the sake of this discussion, water and the Verde River, and how we can begin to, as a county, provide almost an in-kind kind of value. It's not, we'll pay you to come and build here, but they want to be near the river, and because there's value in their price point in doing so. But to do that, they need to provide some demonstration of regenerative practices as it relates to the water. So there's wonderful ways to actually begin to articulate our values as a county and as leadership, particularly, and here's where it becomes clear my passion is, as it relates to our diminishing resources like water.
By the way, I love the term case-by-case basis. I don't know why, but if we could somehow or other insert that in the survey, I think
I'd be happy.
Those words really appeal to me.
I would be happy to build that in.
John has a quick comment, and then I would love to at least burn through cost of development so we can at least move to water resources, since we've already touched on it. So, John, go ahead.
Okay. Well, we've had a rather broad-ranging discussion about what the county should and shouldn't do. I was working at the level that I thought we were working at, which is we're reviewing these questions to see, as sort of a test group. And when I read a question such as, should the county try to purchase sites to try to develop them in the future, yes or no, I put myself in the shoes of a county resident and I go, I haven't the foggiest idea what they're asking here. The second one, or question 5, do you think new development should cover the cost for new development? I think the average resident in Yavapai County is going to look at that question and be totally befuddled as to how to answer it. Something like cost of development. Who should pay the cost of installation of infrastructure such as roads, bridge, sidewalks, sewer lines, sewage treatment plants, rainwater drainage systems, and public landscaping needed for new developments? The developer or property owner, Yavapai County, shared by Yavapai County and the developer or property owner, or no opinion. I think there are ways to ask these questions where the average Joe will understand what you're asking and how to answer. So I'm concerned with the wording of a lot of these questions that they're.
I'd be happy to make some modifications.
Yeah, I think what the suggestion that I'm sort of faintly hearing is perhaps some sort of a preamble to the.
Yes. And all of these would have each one of these surveys would have their own preamble leading into it, what the actual state law says as it relates to each of these elements.
Yeah, that way when somebody does.
We would have all of that built in, just as we do on the other surveys, right?
I'm just thinking there are ways to word the question where you don't need all that preamble, that it's right in the question. I think that would be a better way to write the survey.
We'll certainly look at that when we post these.
Yeah, let me, if I can add in, I like the idea of having multiple choice. Let's educate the community about what we're talking about when we talk about this, because there's something from my perspective that we haven't even addressed, and I think we should. Should the county buy land? If the county owns land, there's options on it, just like, for example, Sedona owns land and is giving them an opportunity to build an apartment complex. with deed restrictions and things like that. There are more issues, I think, that we need to look at, and the ramifications of some of these things are really, to me, exciting and opportunities for the county, that by even putting under the buying land, what does that mean? You know, what are some of the key issues we're talking about? Or you're going to find out that everybody in the county thinks having a workforce housing is the worst thing we could do. But at least it gives us a direction as to what the community is thinking.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Okay, so once again, trying to burn through cost of development. Is there any one of the 7 questions there that anybody would like to discuss, tweak, correct? Yes, sir.
I do. Going back to number 2, when we incentivize these companies, what, how do we enforce that? Like, say, oh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Okay, so we incentivize them, right? And then they have to renege on it somehow, for some reason. Accountability, that's it.
Exactly.
How do we keep these companies accountable for what they say they're going to do?
You bet.
We incentivize them, and then all of a sudden they backtrack. I seen this behavior when I was in Washington and Intel. Intel incentivized, I mean, the
State, yeah.
state incentivized Intel that they could build a facility in DuPont, and the state would pay for an on-ramp or an off-ramp, you know, to get there. And Intel built their facility. Within 2 years, they shut it down. Something like this.
Yep.
So I think the taxpayers got stuck with that on-ramp, and it made people angry, as far as I remember. And yeah, so you end up stuck with this incentive that really has no benefit to anybody, because now Intel's gone.
Yes. You know, so we have several tools available to us. First and foremost is a development agreement. That's something that would be executed by the developer, signed off by the Board of Supervisors, fully enforceable in court, and it's just a matter of building those provisions on that case-by-case basis. The next tool that we have would be very simply the zoning stipulations. As we've seen in many cases, if we have somebody fail to perform on their zoning stipulations because they asked for something and failed to perform, we have very good enforcement mechanisms through our enforcement processes, either on the civil side or all the way up to criminal, to be able to address those very clearly. So I'm not as concerned about that. I've done this a number of years. It really comes down to how well written those development agreements and those stipulations are, and that's why it's important that all of those, you know, are vetted by the county attorneys, and you know, they go through that formal process. But more importantly, they don't just look at the you know, the wonderful day on the grand opening. They look 2 years down the line when the facility is shuttered because of whatever reason. You know, you got to look at the good and you got to look at the bad, and that's part of, you know, building in those development agreements.
Could that possibly be added to this list of questions somehow?
I can look at how we can build that in, see what we can do on that. But those are the existing tools we have right now, very cleanly under Arizona law to address those.
And actually, the word accountability just has such a clear, clean ring to it.
I agree.
That, I think that was a really good suggestion. On your part.
I agree.
Okay, moving right along. Anything else under cost of development?
And
Yeah, Kevin, I got a couple comments.
I was just going to say, if we haven't heard from Prescott yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. Cost of development to me is cost to the county, police, fire, providing road maintenance, things of that nature. And also, when I talk to many of the people, when they talk about cost of development, they're also talking about building codes and the fact that we have more and more code requirements coming in that are increasing the cost of development. So, or you know, building. So, you know, I think we need to maybe ask some questions there too. I'm not sure that we really address those very adequately in this. I agree with the comments on 1 and 4. I think they're now well stated. I'm not really sure what we're trying to get out of that. When you say try to purchase a site, is that land or is that a building? You know, what is it that we're trying to do with that? I think some of these questions definitely need to be cleared up before they go to the public.
Well,
We'll go ahead and do that. And if I may, I meant to do this earlier, I've actually been having internet problems over here trying to bring up the state law. Cost of development in the state law, all it says is cost of development element that identifies policies and strategies the county will use to require development to pay for its fair share towards the cost of additional public facility needs generated by that new development, except when, or I'm sorry, with appropriate exceptions when in the public interest. And then it gets into, funding mechanisms and beneficial development, that the development shall bear a reasonable burden. And Supervisor Oberg is absolutely correct. This goes to libraries, health department, sheriff's office. It also goes to the individual fire districts. Even though the county is not in the fire business, we still need to help look at our partners, to say they need potentially additional things. The school districts. It's not unusual in subdivisions to have school sites be dedicated to the public so that the school down the line when they need to can build that. All of those things are included in here. So we'll go ahead, we'll add a couple more questions in on that and help bolster that up. And I think.
Right. I was wondering, as part of that, could you have an IE?
And that's where I was going to go to clarify some of these. So.
Okay, good. Wonderful. Thank
Very
you.
good.
Anything else?
That would be about
yes,
it.
I see, Mary, I believe you had your hand up. Or Connie, I'm sorry.
Yes, on number 7, could we go back? Is there any possibility that we could add in there, I just made some notes on this, that basically, yes, in some cases, some of the cases could be that the land is landlocked or there's grandfathering issues. It just leaves a lot open for, wondering about some of the statements in there, but could there be, yes, in some cases, because it really is a case-by-case basis on a lot of these questions.
Yes, I'll go ahead and add in some examples into that one as well. When I look at number 7, what I look at first and foremost, my example in this county is Cordis Lakes. And it's the I-17 whole interchange with the 3 bridges. Almost all of the land around that is zoned residential. No one is ever going to build a residential property adjacent to I-17, adjacent to the arterial roads in there, next to Love's, next to McDonald's. It's just never going to happen. I think from an economic development point of view, it makes sense to call it what it is. And, to look at working with those individual property owners to say, look, if you want to come to the table right now, we can have the Planning Commission engage and initiate this particular zoning change on your behalf if you want to go forward. And that cuts about 5 months out of their process, makes it much more marketable.
David, has the county ever considered a dual use zoning? Because we do have situations, just as I said, in fact, I'm dealing with one right now in Phoenix and New River, where we have a piece of residential property that's on the west side, banked by I-17. And on the east side, it's commercial. North side's commercial, south side's commercial. And we're in our pre-application process right now, and we're getting some pushback, but it just as I said, it's a landlocked situation. It's landlocked by the freeway and all these commercial. Why couldn't that be changed by the county in some cases, again, case by case, to a dual use zoning, where the property owner, recognizing their property rights, would have the right to have it either as a commercial or a residential without the application process. It's become we're up to $20,000 now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there is no provision in state law to allow the county to just do that arbitrarily. It has to be with the property owner's permission because of and I have to keep separating them out now, because of the original Proposition 207 back in 2008, not the new marijuana one, but back in 07, 08. It eliminated the ability for counties and cities to walk in and say, this should be zoning X. This should be designated as this. Let's go ahead and just take care of that for you. It eliminated that ability. It actually set it up where if the county does that, then we get sued for it if they don't like it. And if they don't like it, could be 100 years from now. So it just created that liability in perpetuity. So we have to have that engagement. Our zoning ordinance, however, is when we go in and if we were to do this in Cordis Lakes, and I think quite frankly we will, we've already had some direction. It's more of a staffing issue on our side of the fence, more than a policy issue for Cordis. I want to look at the other communities as well. But if we were to rezone that as commercial, they don't lose any rights for residential. All of our zoning regulations from, RCU 2A through C3, I think, C2, C3, stack on top of each other. So every time you go up to a commercial, you still have all the rights of all of your residential. You don't lose anything, which is beneficial.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That to me is a dual use. In that case, it's a triple use.
It's a triple use, and then they get to pick and choose from there which zoning district they really want to enjoy the rights of. I think it works very well having that stacked approach. And I know, unfortunately, Maricopa County doesn't do that.
Well, in this case up here in Yavapai County, do you do that without the homeowner coming and starting the process? Do you just arbitrarily do that?
No, we're unable to just arbitrarily do it. We have to engage the property owner. Now, we can go before the Planning Commission, and I can say, Mr. Commissioners and Mrs. Commissioner, we have an individual here who would like to change the zoning on their property, and if you would see fit, I would like to request that you initiate and direct staff to move forward. We can waive at least the zoning fees in that particular case because it's been initiated by the commission. So we can work, around that and help better everybody's situation a little bit. They're still going to have to create the exhibits, so they're still going to have to do surveys. They're still going to have the base documents. That's not something we can provide, but state law does envision the commission initiating those changes.
So on question number 7, if you get a unanimous yes on that question, will the county take the steps forward to go ahead and initiate in some cases?
In some cases, yes. I would go to the Board of Supervisors first and say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Supervisors, we have a request from a community or we have identified a need. And do you give staff permission to invest the time and resources to engage these property owners?
And if you do that, by the way, that stimulates the economic redevelopment of those areas, because a lot of times I know in my own world for 40 years, that has always been a stumbling point, because the question is, do I have 2 years and $50,000 to go through this process?
Absolutely.
And then what it does is it paralyzes the whole area.
Yes. And part of it, too, is as we go forward in the comprehensive plan process, I'm truly hoping that the pieces of land that I have in my mind that truly need this, that need to be, and we'll just use Cordis as the example, need to be commercial. There's no sense in designating, the I-17 corridor as residential. There just isn't. Then we've already taken care of creating the land use map for the comprehensive plan that now backs up those requests to say, okay, we want to go forward and help this community now.
And it's a trend, because
Yes,
that's the whole premise, is the commercial will pay for the residential. And so in all of the big planned area developments, the municipalities are asking for the commercial buffer to help offset the costs of the infrastructure.
Yes, absolutely.
And so this is an opportunity, Connie, to look at, from my perspective, and David, please weigh in with your experience, to look at cost/in-kind value. This is, in fact, a type of incentivization.
That's right.
Another example that I would point to. And
Yes, it is.
An excellent and powerful tool that we can measure at the end of the year, which I love. So what is the value that's been brought to the county in dollars and cents? I think that's a very powerful tool for us.
Well, that was the attempt with the opportunity zones also.
Yes.
John, I know you have a comment. Hold on. I'd like to say something first. Just want to make sure everybody understands how I operate. I'm a real believer in a break on the hour, every hour. And
We appreciate that.
not that I have a personal burning desire, but there may be somebody else in the group who does. I like to take a 5-minute break every hour. And I think we're almost ready to move to water resources. John has one more comment I see he needs to make, and then I would like to skip to the next element.
We can go through the water resources pretty quick. So.
Yeah, that's fine. But John, what's your comment first?
I really appreciate the discussion of question 7 and the explanation and so forth. I now understand what you're asking, and I could give you an answer. The way it's written here is totally opaque. I think the average resident in Yavapai County would probably just say unsure, or maybe no. I think it could be reworded, in cases where a residential property lies in a commercial district, should the county work with the owner to facilitate rezoning?
Yep.
Something that I could answer as just a normal guy.
Absolutely. I've already put in my comments there to add that in.
You're going to provide, in effect.
You bet.
Okay, water resources.
Let's burn through this real quick. So state law says, and this is going to be real quick, water resource element of the comprehensive plan does not require new independent hydrological studies or the county to be a water service provider. That's all state law says. So we have some questions here. As I have said all along, my intention on this is I am not a water expert. I make no claim other than the fact I know it goes downhill. We are going to retain a hydrologist as a consultant on this who has expertise working in general or comprehensive plans in the state of Arizona to tackle this specific element. The questions that we have had here are, I'm going with more generic in nature to try to address some things that we know we should ask the questions on, but I really want to push this out to a hydrologist for more formal expertise. You know, I will say I'm an expert in Arizona, you know, planning, zoning law, code enforcement. I am not an expert, nor will I ever be in water. So we need to find that person right now. So any questions, thoughts on the questions that we have here so far?
Johnny has a comment on.
Just one comment on this whole water issue. The one thing that I have heard over and over and over in the people that I have talked to in all these various communities is the water table going down?
Yes.
Okay. That's the one burning question, because that's how you decide what to do. So it could be a sentiment question. Are you concerned about development that might lower the water table? A lot of people worry about their wells going dry and so forth. So I think a question along those lines, even though we may not know how we're going to do it or whether we can do it, at least find out where people's thinking is on that. I think you'll find broadly across the county that's a concern.
Yeah, and we do have that in there, you know, 6A, 6B, you know, do you currently use a well? Has it gone dry in the last few years? You know, are you concerned about the future of water in your community?
Well, I'm talking about monitoring the level of the water table. Is it dropping or rising, or what's it doing? Are we refreshing the aquifer or not? So that's the one issue that everyone seems to be focused on.
Gotcha. And I will say, just as a point of interest, I heard this in the news yesterday. You know, up until 3 weeks ago, we were well below water averages for the year, and we are now currently well above water averages for the entire year. So typical of Arizona, we got all our rain and a few rain showers, but and I'm hoping that'll have at least a positive effect on our lakes and rivers and everything.
Jim, you have a question?
Dave, I just want to, I guess, clarify something in my mind. Being on the Planning and Zoning Committee, we are not allowed to consider water as a development issue.
Correct.
So when everyone comes back and says, yes, we're concerned about water, what's the county going to do about that?
It's basically what's going to happen is we have to separate and silo these two off. This is for the comprehensive plan. It's a state law requirement. We've got to address it. That's why I want to bring in the hydrology expert on this to help kind of navigate those legal waters, no pun intended. You know, but we've got to be able to work through that because you're exactly right. The Planning Commission cannot take this into account right now. I know that is an agendized item on the upcoming board meeting, so I don't want to get too deep into that since it's not agendized here, but you know, that right now is where we have to stand. And Mr. Chairman, before we get to Supervisor Michaels, Mary had her hand up first over there, very patiently waiting. I apologize.
That's okay. I would just like to make a general comment. Personally, I love the way the water questions are written. They're easy to understand. Anybody on the street knows exactly what we're asking. So if we could start looking at all of the questions in the surveys from that perspective, assuming that people have, in a sense, no understanding of what we're talking about and no special expertise, I think it will move us amazingly with some of these surveys. Because this one is, I mean, anyone on the street could answer all the questions for them on the water without having to ask any clarification.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
And then I know Supervisor Michaels, and then we've got Connie back here over in the corner. I know it's tough to see through those dividers up there.
It is, even though they're transparent. So go figure. But so it is true. So we probably want to ask if the well is lower than expected and or gone dry. somehow parse that, because the water table, as we all know, does fluctuate. And though we are blessed this moment, we may need in our planning document to be able to speak to that going forward. And then just a brief comment on, gosh, the purview of the P&Z versus the supervisors here as it relates to what can and cannot be considered. It's really important to know an aspect of that distinction, which, yes, there's a prescription within which you must stay. That said, the supervisors have a broader brushstroke with which to paint, and that's intentional because we must, as well as address the technical aspects of an application, also make sure that we're dealing with representing the values of our constituents and the county and our plan. So that in combination, at least in theory, is to serve our constituents in the county in general.
Absolutely. And before we get to Connie over here, Mr. Chairman, one thing I want to point out too, one thing we have seen in development services, kind of boots on the ground with water, is we have seen a lot of people complaining very loudly their wells are going dry. And we have determined their wells were never drilled deep enough to begin with. They got to the water, they went 20 feet and they stopped. You know, and I hate to say it's a self-imposed hardship, but you know, they set themselves up in a condition where they did not drill down, push down a little further to provide that additional buffer. They just didn't give themselves enough margins to accommodate the drought cycles that, you know, we traditionally go through. So that is something we have seen, you know, in the county in different areas.
Okay, and Connie?
Oops, sorry about that. Real quickly, I question the need for question number 4. Don't we have FEMA floodplain designations, and the county could not ever allow, even if you wanted to, you know, prevent development around the waterways such as the Verde Lynx Creek?
Actually, you can build.
So you could overman the FEMA designations, but you could build above the...
As long as you're above those FEMA flood designations,
Okay.
1 foot above the 100-year flood event, you can build. And we do have a lot of private lots, especially along the Verde River, that actually cross the river or are split. They have a meanderland designation on the plat or the lot that was created, so that their lot line actually moves as the river moves.
So the county's thinking about preventing that at some point.
That's kind of why we're asking the question, is should there be additional buffering? Should there be additional things, setbacks, just like we have hillside standards? You know, you can't build on a hillside above a certain slope, just like we have that. That's why we wanted to explore that a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and when we get back, we'll drive through transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry, for the record, we're at 10:59. With the Arizona State Legislature when it comes to funding to making I-17 improvements. You know, this is not a county road in any way, shape, or form, but I think every one of us knows every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you can't go in and out of Phoenix without major delays. I know we had it closed for, boy, I want to say 6 or 7 hours last weekend at the peak travel time. just because of an accident. So I put that one on there, not necessarily as much for the comprehensive plan, but since we're doing a transportation, I wanted to give the Board of Supervisors some extra ammunition.
Great, thanks for the explanation. John, did you have something?
Yes. Question 2, do you feel roadways in the county are empty, too busy, or currently just enough level of traffic? Yes or no?
Thank you. This is what happens when I get in a hurry. Yeah, we'll change the answers on that.
Okay.
And we'll change the verbiage around on that.
Question 10, do you support the county requiting cash in lieu for specific roadways or intersections? Or I don't understand that question, and I don't think most residents would.
We'll go ahead and clarify that. It should be county requiring cash in lieu for specific roadways.
What does cash in lieu mean?
So cash in lieu, let's just use, let's just pick a big developer like Love's when they came in. And I'm not saying this is what they did at all, but as an example, they would have had to have provided, say, a quarter cost share for the intersection at Arcosanti and Stagecoach, so that if they didn't build those improvements, when improvements were finally triggered by other users to say, hey, we need a traffic light here now, we already have that cost, that money sitting in a bank account at the county to be able to be used to fund those intersection improvements, or a half street, roadway improvement, because you don't want to do a scallop street. You don't want to do, have the developer put in the half street road in front of a business, say a second southbound lane, when we know on either side of that nothing's going to be built. You want to do it all as one project so it's cohesive.
I think you explained it very well.
Yes. And I'll clarify the language in the question. That's easy enough.
In some cases, a question like this, it might be best to have a preceding sentence or two to kind of fill them in on what you're talking about. I think that would be very helpful in terms of.
I'd be happy to.
That would probably go somewhere in the direction of cost sharing for public-private ventures. Okay.
I also had 4 questions that I think would be good to add, because I've heard them again from people working on their various vision statements. One is, I would like to see dedicated biking trails separate from the roadways to ensure the safety of bikers.
Okay.
And you could range from strongly agree to strongly disagree, or just yes, no. I would support a special assessment to have unimproved roads paved in my neighborhood. That's a very specific question. I think most people can answer that. I would use public transportation if it were available in my neighborhood. And building permits for new residential and commercial buildings with garages or parking spaces should require that wiring for EV charging be included in the construction plan.
I actually already built that into the building code.
Okay, good.
I was ahead of the game on that. We already require additional outlets in garages specifically to address that. I'll throw a quick comment out there while we're on that subject. We're actually looking at building code requirements now to require smoke detectors in garages if they have electric vehicle charging stations in them. We've seen a significant danger due to fires. We've had several vehicles actually explode in garages while charging. So I want to give people in a house as much warning as possible in the event they have a problem in that garage with the charging of a car. So.
Good, thank you. Anything else?
So what I heard here is 3 questions, because I've already taken care of number 4 for you.
Very good.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Anything else under transportation?
Yeah, this is Vinny. I'd like to add a few comments if I can, please.
Please, Vinny.
Great.
Number 1, and again, I think overall, I think the questions are pretty simple, and I appreciate that. I know one of the members was just commenting on what number was it, the last one, in lieu of, and I appreciate you changing that, because they're pretty simple questions, and then you get to that one and it gets really complex. But on number 1, when you say transportation methods, I guess my encouragement, and forgive me if this was already covered, you all were muted in the beginning, but you unmuted yourselves, and if it was already covered, sorry. But transportation methods, I would encourage some examples. I again assume it's bike, ped, maybe transit, roads. But I would try and give examples on that number 1 if that's possible.
Yeah, or perhaps swap out options for methods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we can go ahead and God, my mic does keep cutting out here. I'm sorry. Let me swap mics here, see if that helps.
And while Dave's doing that, I would tie in number 5. It's also similar in that way. Again, doing transportation, I'm pretty sure I know what you mean. but again, to the everyday public that's maybe not following. Same thing when it says non-vehicular connections. I can list that pretty quick, but maybe to the public to give some examples. So 1 and 5, I think would just help with a few more examples within that question itself.
Right, and David had already mentioned that he was going to identify specific non-vehicular connections.
Yeah, we'd already taken care of number 5. I've got that included, and I will go ahead and expand out on number 1 to accommodate that.
And then
Anything
I
else
think
on transportation?
yeah, my only last comment. So, and it's been hit on briefly, but maybe another way to look at it. So if you look at, in my opinion, 4, 7, and 8, you're asking a question, and if the person responds that they're not satisfied with the transportation system, to me, it sets it up for a natural next question. If you're not satisfied, would you be willing to support, again, some way of additional funding for it, which the first thing goes to possibly a road type of tax or something else. But I don't know to propose a question as it stands by itself, or again, you could do an easy follow-up. But as I read it, to me, it's just a very natural flow that if I'm unsatisfied with something, then the next question of me is, would I be willing to support some additional funding, which again would cause me to provide that in some way, or the greater community to provide that in some way. So that would be my encouragement. And those are discussions we've had over the years. You know, I think an example would be like a county regional transportation authority. Tucson has one, Pinal County, Pima County, Flagstaff has one. When the county decides to go after some additional funding, very specific though to the community, to say, look, you've identified these key areas and we can address them beyond maintenance, but again, it's going to require some contributions by the greater public. So just wanted to add that. That's all I have.
Thanks, Vinny. Very good. And I saw David nodding and writing, so.
And as I'm thinking here, Vinny just brought up another point. I'm going to probably add in an additional question here related to, due to the, I don't know how I'll word this, but due to the sunsetting of the transportation impact fee, what other potential funding sources may you look at? What other, would you be, something along those. I want to be able to address a question on, now that the impact fees are gone, how do we fund these things? Because we're losing $1.5 million to $2.5 million a year right now in the loss of those impact fees. So that may be another good question to bring out.
Yeah, and if the supervisors want to reword it or change it or whatever, then that's kind of their question anyways. Ultimately, they own it, so. But it sounds like a good idea, a good direction to go in. Anything else on transportation before we move to open space? Great, let's go to open space then. We have 7 questions.
I had a couple of comments here. On question 5, it says, does location of open spaces make a difference to their need? I'm not sure what that's asking.
Let me reword that. What we're looking at there, in my mind, is when we talk open space, where would it make the most sense for a park? Where would it make the most, at what level of service, if we were to provide a park, should that be? If we're right next to a community, do you just want a trailhead to be able to launch into the forest? Do you want, playground equipment? Let me see how we can reword that and clarify that language a little bit.
And then question 7 says, do you feel existing recreation opportunities in your area, I would say, are adequate? I don't think you need the overrun and out of space. Just say.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not so sure of that, because I think we have to give voice somewhere in this question, or perhaps another one, about the reality of our overuse on some of our forest lands and roads, and then recreation areas. We certainly have experienced during our time of COVID, and now out of it, temporarily anyway, up here, that our areas to recreate are terribly burdened, to the point that vegetation, trees, and safety are threatened. And so we need to speak that somewhere in here, and I leave it to you, David, to give it a first draft, but I think this is a timely concern.
I don't know about anybody else, but I like the term overburdened as opposed to overrun.
Easily, I can easily make that change.
Okay. And Donna, there was something else you mentioned, another word you threw in there that I'm sure.
You know, I tell people I have a great memory. It's just short.
Yeah, no.
So I'm not quite sure what I said.
I heard you close out with adequate. And
Yes.
I think that might be a good modifier to throw in there.
Okay, be happy to. And then as we were just talking here, I realized, Supervisor Michaels, I did not include a question that I meant to on off-highway vehicle use. Let me build that one in as well. I know we already have that
Please
under
do.
environmental, but let's go ahead and address that in here as well.
Perfect, thank you. I think we're ready to move on to growth. Anybody? Okay, good. Let's talk about growth. We have 8 questions. Anything that jumped out at anybody?
My thought on number 6 was, are you concerned about services as the county population grows? My thought was, what services are you talking about? So maybe just list a few that you think would be important to know about.
Be happy to.
Anything else? Okay.
Question 2 and 3.
Yes.
Your microphone may be off.
Oh, hello. Oh, sorry.
Or just closer.
Yeah, I think 2 and 3 are a bit redundant. If you say grow and would you like to see your area grow and expand over the next 10 to 20 years? And then asking, would you see your community remain the same over 20? I mean, to me, it's asking the same question but different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let me see how we can reword that.
Okay.
Seems like it could be consolidated into one question.
Yeah, yeah.
So on number 4, do you feel there are enough young adults coming to your area? So I wonder if we couldn't expand this idea, which I really like, about the question itself. Are we as a county doing all we can to attract young families that could who are desiring a rural lifestyle while being able to add to our economic our health? Somehow we need to look at not just do we have enough young people coming, but why? You know, for example, Yavapai County is known for its ag industry, whether it's small cattle ranching or produce. You know, there's a great push in the Verde Valley for example, Verde Valley made, Verde Valley grown, and there's a desire to attract young families to bolster that kind of self-reliance. So maybe there's some language about how do we create economic self-reliance or a robust economic engine and self-reliance through attracting young families. I mean, it has to tie to a reason.
Donna, may I comment to that real quick? This is Connie. How about attracting and retaining our millennials? We deal with that a lot in Prescott, and we're actually gaining.
I think one issue in that regard is education. If they have to go elsewhere to get their education, and afterwards, many of them, if they're in a high-tech job or something, do we have adequate internet service here? A lot of them would like to live here. It's possible now to live and work remotely. If we don't have adequate internet service, people will go elsewhere.
So what I'm hearing here, and jump in here, but what I'm hearing here, Supervisor Michaels, is maybe a second question to say, is the economy adequate to support young families? Kind of yes, no, or unsure. And then I agree with John's comment about internet. That is absolutely an issue countywide to make sure that we have that for the future. I know it's near and dear to Mary's heart as well.
What's an issue nationwide?
I was going to say something else, because I think what we can use this survey to find out the education or the understanding of our communities. And I would put a question in, do we have enough age diversification in our communities? The answer is totally no, if you've read any of the studies. But how many of our people realize that? I mean, it's dramatic. We just did the housing study, and the age of the Verde Valley is we've lost loads of percentage of, the younger families and things like that. So maybe asking that question, which then would direct us to say, we have a real education problem here in that the county doesn't understand what our demographics really look like.
So even a broader brushstroke, David, may be, what demographic do we need to encourage in our county to come to our county to ensure an economic self-reliance. And that opens up the door beyond education, because we know, certification and vocational areas as well, whether it's the meat processing, for example, working with potential funders on how do we get, some traction on for our small cattle ranchers, meat processing here, so that adds not only economic to our economic well-being, but it attracts young families who want to be in that ag sector, and it ties to education because you have to have a certification to qualify to be that. So this is really an important area, and I think we need to look at what are the dots within this section that we could be connecting by asking the right questions.
See David nodding his head. Do you have a...
Yeah, no. I'm just going back into the ARS here for just a minute, but I'm agreeing completely here. And I think that's actually a really good point to try to drill down here. I'm just trying to think of a couple other questions to drill down in that a little bit. I may, if you guys are comfortable, I may go ahead and just add a couple more questions to drill down based on the comments I'm hearing from everybody here. I want to be able to think about that a little more.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
I don't want to get into an equal opportunity issue in this, but I think we can have a good balance here, because I agree. We, as the census will tell us, I'm sure, whenever we get it, as the census will tell us, our population is aging in this county, and we need to start looking at those opportunities to bring in those younger generations to have us be sustainable in the long run.
So here's where we could help set the stage with a preamble, recognizing that, so on and so forth, and understanding the need for technology underpinning and the importance of our ag sector to our health as a county. Then we can flow from that, can then flow some of these questions that really will cast a broader net and maybe give us back some good questions from our public as well.
Very good, thank you. Anything else on growth before we head for the elephant in the living room here? Land use.
Just some clarification here. When she was talking about technology, was that technology applying to agriculture or just anything in general? Because I see technology needs to expand and be more broad. Because if you're just going to say that, oh, we're going to support technology in an agricultural sense, that takes out all the other people that are streamers. They stream videos.
I agree completely.
Do business,
that's
like online
absolutely.
businesses and so on and so forth. We need to make it inclusionary.
Absolutely. And no, I wasn't referring in any way at all to only the ag sector. I was using the ag sector just as an economic engine potential, given who we are in rural Arizona. So, but we need technology in all of them.
Well, and I think the backbone for all of that is high-speed internet. Getting as fast as we can in here to be able to accommodate the streamers and everybody else, be able to have that true platform where we can run video conferencing in New York or wherever we need to locally here, as we all found over the last year. We all saw the limitations and the successes of where we were last year. We had some great examples and we had some real poor examples of,
That's a good way
not having adequate capacity.
That's a good way to put it in the preamble too,
I
given
agree.
the last year
This would
experience.
be a question that would be part of the growth under
Yes.
growth where it would be like, how adequate do you think your internet is, for that, for that particular individual at that place, whatever place.
I agree completely.
Okay.
Growth includes infrastructure, and as far as I'm concerned, broadband internet is infrastructure.
Yeah, and I would say it includes cell phones too, because a lot of folks do hotspots and like to be mobile in terms, doing these.
And I'll be honest, and unless you guys tell me otherwise, I stayed away from cell towers in this questionnaire. We just changed the county's ordinance on cell towers to basically adjust ourselves to where federal law is. Federal law basically says cell towers now, they're stopping just short of calling it critical infrastructure, but the only grounds that the board could even deny a cell tower is in the event it was not put in the least obtrusive method possible, and that it was not filling a service gap. Well, that service gap could be one house. So, it put the board in a very difficult situation where federally we were having to just approve them. Even though we had use permit processes in place, they're here, that they're in our society now. I mean, I have 2 of them on my table right now for just me, not to mention the 2 computers, and, we got, I don't know, half a dozen internet connections running right now at just our table. So they're here, but that's why I stayed away from that. But the broadband to me is more critical. Having that in the ground, having, the ability to set up a home office above and beyond, just a simple MiFi type hotspot. I think that's really critical. I see the infrastructure, for all of the businesses, being much more internet intensive. We're going to see much more alternate reality. We're going to see much more AI built in on all of these things. We're going to see a lot of these things, which are a lot more data intensive than we'd seen before. So,
I just want to make one more comment regarding the internet. Startups today are, especially high-tech startups, which are really the engines of growth right now. They critically need good internet service. So if we want to really boost the economy and come up with good paying jobs and so forth in the county, it's going to be important to encourage entrepreneurialism, and that's going to be done through the internet.
Thank you, John. Okay, I think we're ready to wade into land use. This is a fairly lengthy one. So has everybody had an opportunity to review it?
it's it's the elephant in the room, that's for sure.
Without question. This particular area probably generates more heat than anything else.
At the end of the day, this is really what the comprehensive plan is all about. It's about the land use.
I did have
Chairman?
one comment.
Go ahead, John.
It says, what retail uses would you like to see in your community? And it's a free form.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a very innovative approach in these vision statements. Questions to the effect that I would accept a rezoning in my neighborhood to allow a convenience store. Now, that kind of input is very useful to the county.
I like that a lot, John.
I would accept a rezoning in my neighborhood to allow for high-density housing, such as apartments, condos, and timeshares, providing they are completely surrounded by a dedicated open space. And I think you could take that form of the question. I would accept rezoning in my neighborhood if or for, and apply that to all sorts of, gas stations, motels, whatever. And I think that would be very revealing as far as knowing how to talk to developers when they come to the county. You'd know what areas would welcome what.
I agree completely. I like that question.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I see a lot of nodding heads. Go ahead, please. Connie?
Yes, David, I would like a clarification too of the stipulations in the county for the open space. The last time I looked into it a few years ago, it was in a PAD, a planned area development. The requirement was a percentage. Is there any way, and I always thought that it was a little faulted because they didn't require that percentage be intact. And so what we found were retention ponds, being counted as open space. And is there any way that we could, or you could, as a county, go back and look at that requirement for a developer instead of just a percentage? Of course, you need the percentage there, but could the percentage be required to be intact by way of small little parks instead of having the percentage? Because what they're doing, and a lot of people don't have the ability to know what scale is. So if you the developer says, oh, I'm giving you this swath of land and it's, 25 feet wide by 75. Well, nobody really knows, not a lot of people know what that means or what that looks like. And so they can basically just pile those into the retention ponds and call them an open space. And you really don't get any open space. It's a misnomer.
Yeah. And that's, having the retention basins for open space is a common thing in the industry.
I know.
Unfortunately. I don't know. I would have to actually have a discussion with our county attorney on modifying that, because right now we just say open space. And we say, okay, you cluster your development, you move it around in the PAD, you can do that. And it's trying to leave the creativity up to the individual developer, assuming they would come forward with something positive. I would worry anything being built into that may constitute a taking. Providing more restrictive environment on that. It may constitute a taking under Arizona law. That's something I would have to have a heart-to-heart with a county attorney on to see whether that would fall under that.
But do you see what I'm saying about the open
I
space?
absolutely do, and I'll tell you right now, I'm very guilty of developing many subdivisions down in the Southeast Valley where the retention basins were the open space because we required on-lot in subdivision retention of all the water. So that was kind of the trade-off. So those became your soccer fields.
Well, I see it happen all the time. In fact,
Yes.
Out in Dewey, when Young's Farm was still around and that developer came in from Phoenix and wanted to develop Young's Farm, I think one of the main things that shut him down, other than the fact that people just didn't want him, is his misrepresentation of open space. And I had encouraged everybody in the audience to go down and at that time look in the subdivision on the corner of Carefree Highway and I-17, the Tremonto one, so that they could visualize what 25 by 75 really meant. It's just not that big.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. That is something I'll go ahead and I'll chat with the attorney about.
I know it'll be difficult.
My gut tells me we're going to be told no.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely ask the question because it's a very good point.
But, in that language is everything, as you know, in these pieces of legislation. So you can always insert except for, so you could accept or exclude the ponds and still maintain the integrity. So add that in with your conversation so it's not a yes or no, up or down.
No, I absolutely would. Sounds good.
Okay, moving right along. Anything else under land use? Yes, please.
David, in Prescott Valley, a classic example of the misuse of open space is Granville, which originally was to have a golf course, and now it's nothing but weed-filled space that's totally unusable. And I think if we could say open space usable by residents, not for, yeah. Because, there's so many classic examples of misuse of open space.
One of the, I'm just going to bring this out from my past, about 9 years ago. I did a 900-acre subdivision in the town of Queen Creek for the town, and I got the developers on board for that, and it really speaks to the open space. We designed this 900 acres, 2,300 homes, we had to have some open space. I had a massive drainage channel, 300 feet wide, coming through the thing that Pinal County dropped on us in the 11th hour. We had a major SRP 230 kV line that went down the other side. This thing was as encumbered as you could be by offsite issues. But we built into that a trail network. And we used the open space under the power lines. We had the drainage channels, so we were able to push water out of those areas. But we designed a project that if you were to go out for a walk through your community every day, you would have a different experience because we built in plantings that had different blooming times and colors at different times of the year. And we had an amenity package that was very specific to all ages. So you had, these wonderful, more adult recreation areas, and then you still had your tot lots and everything. I think there are ways we can do this very, very well, especially in planned area developments. You know, PADs get such a negative, comment from the public, but quite frankly, they provide for far more flexibility than traditional zoning does. And I love that, being able to bring that creativity into those, and we need more of that. And I think this will help get us there.
So I would recommend, if I may, getting some language in there around that. You know, for example, Sedona did a great job with their community plan in many ways, but in one particular way was to encourage a developer to connect the walking trails.
Yes.
And so that's land use. So wherever possible, you know, make it friendly for walking, biking, getting people off the road and still able to get somewhere.
Exactly.
And so, you know, somewhere in here with land use, recognizing these values in the preamble, perhaps.
Yes.
You could identify those things.
I think we can too, and I'm gonna add a couple more questions in on this to be able to identify the open space comments and everything, and see what we can do. We'll see what the county attorney lets me get away with.
Okay, that said, speaking of getting away with things, anything else under land use? Good. Well, why don't we move on to dark sky?
Okay.
I did have one comment on question 3. Do you feel signage is lit appropriately, too much, or not enough? Yes or no?
Should we put an unsure, or?
Well, maybe you could give them 3 choices: appropriately, too much, or not enough, instead of yes and no.
We can do that.
Yeah.
That's easy enough.
Yeah, just drop the yes and no, really.
Yeah, exactly. We'll just put 3 choices. We'll just put those as the answers.
And then as it relates to 4, do you prefer your neighborhood well lit at night? And now, who's going to say, no, I want to be in total darkness and afraid? So I think maybe explaining that a little bit might be in order, David. You know, we want to be able to feel safe and see, but not at the cost of losing our what? Dark sky.
Exactly.
Yeah, not at the cost of being observable from the space station or anything like that. Okay. Let's see. Anything else under dark sky? Pretty clear.
I got one. I think, Kevin, I think one question we should ask is, do you agree with a dark sky policy for the county? We don't ask that here. We automatically go in, start talking about, you know, can you see the stars at night, and do you think things are well lit? I think the first thing you got to ask is, does the person that's taking the survey agree with the county having a dark sky policy?
That's a great suggestion. And actually, I think that should be question number 1.
I agree.
Okay.
You might want to define that so people know what they're answering, yes or no, or maybe to.
Yeah, we'll set that up. I've got that included in here now as number 1.
Okay, great. Anything else?
I don't want to make you cringe, but this might be the place, or we'll have another category perhaps, to do /dark sky, bear with me, /quiet sky. There's a great deal of discussion right now on this side. I suspect, knowing that Embry-Riddle intends to expand on the other side as well, about airplane noise. And remember how long we're going to have this plan. And so somewhere in here we need to raise the question, the discussion around what do we mean by quiet skies. There are complaints with all of our airports in this area about training, was it touch, you know,
Yeah.
Thank you. And helicopter tours over neighborhoods, shuttering the glass in your dining room, etc. And so it's on us right now. I think we would be forward thinking to find a place, whether it's with the sky element, dark or quiet, but perhaps a separate category to make sure that we address that.
Let me take a look at that and run it by the attorneys. There are issues with obviously any aircraft operations being 100% out of our purview, but
and I recognize that.
Let me see if we can't get you some tools at least to
absolutely
look at the question.
We recognize that while it is, of course, the FAA FAA that regulates all that. There are communities right now that are going through the process of expanding their airport, and a great deal of tension about the noise that already exists around them. So I think we would be remiss in not finding a way to state a value about that and begin that process.
I think a sentiment question, aircraft noise is a problem in my neighborhood would be a simple way to do it.
Can I make a comment on that also? I've been, along with Harry Oberg, involved with the expansion of the Prescott Airport. And one thing we know, because we've got a lot of development encroaching on the airport, there's absolutely nothing you can do about the noise. It's protected by the FAA. But what needs to happen is the developments need to have a disclosure statement in every single contract, and they need to be aware of the airplane noise, the people that are purchasing the homes, I mean, because it is a liability and it needs to be disclosed right away. But in terms of noise pollution itself, those are ordinances. And I have found myself in, studying the ordinances a lot of times, the ordinances are in place and the county has them also. They're just not enforced.
When you deal with
from these lowrider cars, the motorcycles, the Harley Davidsons. I used to own some property down in Carefree. Carefree did statewide the most excellent job in enforcing their noise ordinance, and it took about 2 to 3 years. But it is a different place there because they allowed the encroachment of residences up to the main road, which would have been Tom Darlington or Cave Creek Road, but they pushed it, enforced it, and it's just now it's known, and they really have a very small problem with noise pollution now in the town of Carefree, Cave Creek.
See, that's a very good example of stating a value, making it explicit in the statement, and we also have noise abatement, which are voluntary agreements. And so we can add that in there. Do you think noise abatement agreements make good sense for communities to develop in concert with their airport authority? Those are things I think that show we're paying attention and that open the opportunity as we go forward in time to be effective with communities in addressing it.
One thing we can look at, and of course, I can tell you every new subdivision in the county that goes into any area near any airport, I ensure that we already have notes on the plat identifying, we're just doing one right now for Prescott area, identifying to say that this is an airport of, active private commercial training, military aircraft. You will be subject to noise, providing that. Other airports have gone down the road of recording navigation easements over the area, just as, again, further disclosure to say, hey, you have an airport in your area. Unfortunately, Cave Creek did a great job, Carefree or Cave, whoever it was up there, always get them mixed up. But with the noise ordinance, with the Harleys and everything, I very clearly remember all of that. We can't touch airplanes. We just can't when it comes to that noise, and we actually risk federal funding by doing so. But those easements do work really well. Down in the Southeast Valley with Mesa Gateway Airport, I served on a lot of their advisory panels down there. We had the navigation easements. Every model home complex that came in, we required a sign at their front door saying, hey, there's an airport over here. You don't get to complain about the airplane noise when you buy a house off the end of the runway. And then there were also all of the documents as part of formal disclosure. I had to sign off all of those when I purchased my house saying, yes, I know there's an airport there, I'll record it. I think education is very beneficial, when we start talking about those things. There are some noise limitations that can be put in place by the FAA over public airports, but they are only on old jet engines. And we don't have any of those. Well, no, we don't have any of those, thankfully. You would know. What's that? Yeah.
Those are the first.
Yeah.
You're talking about the first generation.
First generation of the jet engines. Right. And that was a major issue with those. I mean, they would come out screaming. And of course, the loudest aircraft that we have here, having an office at the end of the runway at Prescott Airport, I can tell you every time an F-18 takes off or, an we got the T-6s, and everything else that take off out of there, Texan 2s. I can tell you every time we have one take off out of there, it goes right over our offices, loud, and they're completely exempt. So it creates some issues. I know as an industry, aviation is going towards quieter aircraft anyways. The new engine designs are extremely quiet. The new propeller designs help minimize noise as well, but it's a matter of aging those out.
Yeah, they're actually experimenting with electric now. So
Yes, they are. Yes,
pretty
they are.
interesting for commuter flights. Okay.
I may make a comment, please. I think we need to be really careful in the questions regarding noise.
Yes.
That we don't lead people to think they have a choice.
Absolutely.
Because truthfully, they have no power when it comes to some of this. You know, I mean, so giving them the idea that we could do something about it is not true, particularly when it comes to airports and some of those different kinds of things. I think we need to be really careful, you know, on some of just how we present some of those kinds of things, particularly related to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think David understands that clearly, as do we all, but there are in place noise abatement agreements that are voluntary and that require collaboration and conversation and agreement, and they're very effective. I know a couple of airports that have them now.
Chairman, may I make a comment on that also?
Yeah, please.
That is something where I see with the master plan that we need in Yavapai County, some of that can be avoided way ahead by zoning. If you have a master plan for a potential airport expansion, I think the zoning needs to change around the crash zones, for example, the commercial areas. That's where the county could actually do some good and be proactive with a big master plan, which I think, as you said before, we need that master plan. I'm just going to use the example of Circle K. Circle K buys their building envelopes out something like 20 years ahead of, you know, when they're going to need them, because they do this based on the master plans of different communities. As the communities start to move, you know, let's say for us in Prescott north, they have already purchased those properties for Circle K's, but based on the county's general plan or the plan, you know, the master plan. Right. And I do think that if there's something like this that the county can step into and do some rezoning based on a master plan, I think they would be well within their rights to do that.
Yes.
Thank you, Connie. I think we're ready to move into
disasters.
Yes, disasters.
Disaster, yeah. So we just have some questions in here. I'm not quite sure where we're going to work this in. I think it's going to be more of a land use, but I'd like some, you know, just more general questions, because this is something the county goes through on a, you know, unfortunately pretty regular basis. Our department is obviously on, you know, call every time we get a big storm coming in, anything like that, fires, we respond to these as well and try to recover the community. So I wanted to just include some things in there, again, to get the discussion going.
I think question 2 there where it says, do you feel prepared in case of a technological disaster? I don't know how I'd answer that. I'm not really sure what you're talking about.
That sounds like a good one for examples.
I'll go ahead and expand on that.
Okay.
So maybe we shouldn't title it disaster sustainability.
Safety might be a better term.
Yeah, let's not sustain any disasters.
I'd like
We try to get out of them quickly. Recovery is what I like.
I'd like to suggest a question to add to those.
Please.
Developers who submit applications to Yavapai County should be required to include an emergency evacuation plan. Not just the fact that they've got 2 exits, but exactly how would the evacuation be done? How long would it take? That sort of thing. A study should be done.
I think that's a great idea, because that's a question that often comes up anyways in planning and zoning.
Yes.
Frequently comes up.
Absolutely, and that's a major topic in Prescott Valley on their stuff. So I'll be happy to include that in.
And I think we should change question 3, because everyone is going to say it's not timely if it's affecting them. And so I think we're setting out sort of, I mean, unfairly an unrealistic expectation that we might want to reword this. I'm not totally sure why, but I think you hear where I'm coming from. How do people define timely?
Okay, I'll figure out about rewording that. Okay, very good.
Okay, anything on 4 through 6?
Okay. Oh.
I think I saw Connie's hand go up.
Yeah, just a question about David, I'm not privy to this information, but does the county have any kind of an evacuation plan, given we only really have 3 roads to get out, if there was a catastrophic fire event? I mean, is there a plan? Because, you know, I've often thought that if you sent a postcard out to every homeowner, especially where I live in the downtown historic area in Prescott, Arizona, of a suggested evacuation, again, we only have Gurley, you know, getting out of town. Is there a plan? Does anybody have a plan?
You know, this is something that emergency management works on. We do have plans that exist throughout the county. The problem is, and I have dealt with disasters now for 25 plus years. I've never seen one plan work. You can't plan for disaster because as soon as you do, Murphy's Law is going to kick in. And cause all sorts of problems with that. So it really has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But I can tell you there's a tremendous amount of pre-planning that the county and the cities have already done for evacuation sites, evacuation routes, everything else, all the resources necessary to say if we have an incident in Prescott, pull the trigger, boom, here's all the resources we need right now. The county is very good at that.
But shouldn't that go out to the homeowners? Because, you know, in the event of like what happened when they cut that fiber optic cable and all of a sudden all of northern Arizona had no cell phone, no computer, we wouldn't be able to get.
The problem with that is we do have national security issues related to that. Identifying our plans publicly makes them targets as well. Mm-hmm. We have to look, unfortunately, at bad actors as well causing issues and, you know, causing problems. So I would say no.
Oh, it's crazy.
Better for it to go out over, you know, other means when it's happening.
Okay, anything else on 4 through 6?
Question 6. Could we just rephrase this instead of making it type of disasters that concern you the most, make it more like a priority from 1 to 5. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And then we can probably get better metrics on how people feel based on the area that they're in.
Kind of like ranked choice voting, huh?
Yeah, something like sure.
Absolutely. Done.
Okay, let's see. We have one more item to move through, and that's flood planning. Yep. I think we're done.
Food planning.
Food planning, I'm sorry, food planning, flood planning.
And these questions were put on here just to try to address Verde Valley Food Council. They have brought forward some of these, thoughts. Just wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts on these. It's kind of getting more on the public health side, but I thought it would be a good discussion to include.
Well, I think we should change the title to food planning or /security.
Okay.
And I think we should expand it because I think it's a real issue about not just amount of food, it's quality of food and some of those kinds of issues that also, come into play when we're talking food.
Dave, I'm concerned that the county is going to be involved in food for people. Can you give me an idea as to where you're coming from on this?
You bet. Where I'm coming from on this is basically trying to identify food deserts that we have within the county right now, where we have nothing in close proximity for fresh groceries, fresh meats, vegetables, all of that across many of our communities. When I think, first and foremost, even though Verde Valley Food Council is the one that's, got an actual plan put together for this, I see deficiencies in, the I-40 corridor. I see deficiencies in, Cordis Lakes and Mayor, Spring Valley, some of those areas where we're lacking some of these resources. I look at this not from the food plan as much as saying we need to move this into the land use element or the growth element to say, we need grocery stores. We need, coming back into the agriculture, we need better quality food in some of these areas. How can we use the comprehensive plan to help facilitate that? That's what I'm looking at.
And it's a public health matter, which is county business.
Yeah, it is.
So when people are ill or have type 2 diabetes and become increasingly ill in their lifetime because of the food deserts that they are living in, it impacts our quality of life index, but it also impacts our purses because we're paying for those conditions through our county health department, et cetera. So I think it makes sense to, open the door a little bit and trying to understand what position and values we should be articulating here.
Okay. Sounds good. I do have quality of food on that list, so we'll go ahead and I'll formulate some questions around that.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay, we're just about ready for our next break, and when we come back, then we'll be able to dive into the next number 6 in new business, discussion and approval of the land use map categories, and I actually kind of prepared David. I had some personal questions about that, and he's going to provide some explanation before we jump into it. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and then come on back, and let's get going on this.
Sounds good. I show we're 11:58.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, we're on to topic number 6, discussion and approval of land use map categories. And David, why don't you pick this one up, please?
Thank you very much. So our current comprehensive plan only has 4 categories to somehow describe the land uses of 8,000 square miles. So it doesn't work. It also is not parcel centric, so it just gives us large swaths of land and says this is a municipal growth area, which means it's going to be a more urbanized area, or a transitional area, which means it's in an area that's building next to that municipal area, or we have a rural community or a rural area. So we have to be able to delineate down deeper and be able to identify down to the parcel level what the appropriate use of that land should be and the density associated with it. So what we're proposing right now is the categories you have before you, and this is pretty typical of, general plan or comprehensive plan land use maps to have varying densities. So starting off, because we have a lot of very large acreage, we want to start off at a residential ranch, which would be a 10-acre parcel or bigger in a truly rural area. This is intended to be a single-family house, large acreage, our Ash Fork, Juniper Wood, Bridge Canyon type areas, dropping then down to a rural estate next, which would be somewhere between 1 acre in size and 10 acres in size. Residential 0 to 1 dwelling units per acre. This is where we start getting into more of a built type of an environment. We want to be able to protect the ranches. We want to be able to protect the farms. And that's why we have those first 2 categories. The other residential categories, the 0 through 1 through up to residential 8 plus, would be identifying the densities that we have for other residential uses. And the residential can mean multifamily, it can mean duplexes, it can mean a lot of different things, but we've got to be able to break it down and show what that is. These are categories, by the way, we already have these in our built environment today. We're not creating anything new, we're just calling it, we're applying a label to what we already have. And I want to say again, this should have been done in the 2012 comprehensive plan, the land use map. We have nothing. All of this is work that should have been taken care of already. So we're basically picking up, trying to fix, what our predecessors didn't do. Commercial, again, we got to identify where commercial is. We need to be able to do that. We need to identify where our industrial employment areas are within the county. We also want to be able to identify open space, conservation type lands, and recreational lands. Agricultural hospitality. I want to talk about this one a little bit. We need to be able to preserve our our vineyards, our wineries in the Page Springs area, the Verde Valley. We're seeing them, start to come up all over the county. This is intended to be a land use category specific to those types of uses. What we have to get away from is a use permit for every winery that wants to come in the door. So this creates a comprehensive plan designation that we can then, down the line, if we finally have this approved, we can create a land use zoning designation that helps empower the wineries for their success to the future. Now, one change I do want to make in here. In discussion here with Leah this morning, I would like to change this from 10 acres to 5 acres to make it a little more appropriate.
You're talking about the first one, residential ranch?
No, I'm sorry. I've kind of blown through all of those. I'm down to agricultural hospitality right now. I'd like to change that 10-acre minimum to a 5-acre minimum. We think we capture more of our vineyards. Over in the Verde Valley, we pretty much capture, I think,
Absolutely.
all of them.
And that has tax implications.
It has major tax
And
implications.
so speak to that, if you will, because I think that's important.
Absolutely. These are booming industries right now. What I want to be able to do is have a land use zoning designation down the line that says, we expect these things to be successful. We want wineries to have these ancillary uses like restaurants. We want them to say, you can have a bed and breakfast. You can have something small there. What we don't want is a Ferris wheel. We don't want, the Schnepp Farms of the world that, we don't want these, to go into this area. That changes the entire character. We want to protect the character that is there, but give them a framework where they can walk in our front door here and say, hey, I need a new building because we're ready to expand. And we say, great, go for it. Just apply for the permits. Right now, every winery that we have in the Verde Valley and in the county, quite frankly, is on a use permit. So the second they deviate and say, I need just 400 square feet to put a building up to park my tractor in, triggers a whole new use permit requirement. This is where, we talked about earlier about identifying trends and being able to be reactive and address it. This is one of those things where we need to build this in. And so that's what we're looking at there. We want to protect the wineries. We want to protect other ag uses that would be similar and comparable to this, but not going the, Knott's Berry Farms, Schnepp Farms type of approach.
And just to speak to the tax piece of it, and that was very well said, David. I fully support it, by the way. That'll surprise you. Is it 4 acres that it has to be in constant permanent production?
It actually has to be 10 acres under vine to achieve an agricultural exempt status. However, that doesn't mean all 10 acres have to be in one spot.
Okay.
So what we have is we have the operational function of the wineries, where the public comes and does all that. But then they have their other ancillary land parcels around there. So they're over that threshold from a taxation point of view. They meet that for agricultural exemption. What we have to look at then is just the land use for the actual, vineyard, the winery at that specific location where the public is. And that's what I want to best address. The assessor's office, they do their own thing, but 10 acres under vine is the threshold last I heard on that. So, but it doesn't have to be contiguous. It can be 2 miles down the road at another location. Yeah,
so that takes care of our viticulture. But, we have in the Verde Valley, I can only speak to that with any knowledge base, but folks who are doing 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre, 4 acre production in produce, and they are not... it's not a tax break is not available to them. And I wonder if this is the right moment in time and place to look at that, because they are amazingly prolific in what they provide and go a long way to creating the self-reliant, as we like to speak to it, Verde Valley. And yet they receive no, if you will, incentive. Even though they're 1 or 2 acres, they're producing a great deal of quality vegetables and produce that people come from miles around to buy.
Yes.
But it's almost punitive for these small.
And that's a question better situated at the state legislature, because it's the, and I forget what title it is under state law, but it's the taxation laws on that. And it's not something we control. Judge Simmons would be the person to talk to specifically for direction on that, how to address those smaller uses. But, right now we're just talking about the individual land use.
But we may at some point be able to give voice to it that we value in a preamble. Absolutely. As we look at because these are really policy statements in disguise.
Yes, they are. They absolutely are. They absolutely are.
We may want to give voice to how we value the ag sector to the smallest 1 acre ag vegetable producer that provides to the marketplace.
Yes, absolutely. And we can look at that. And as I've said before, this is not a be-all, end-all. As we go forward here, I fully expect we may have additional categories where we may need to modify, but I need to get the crayons out and start coloring is what this is about today. We got to start coloring in on the maps and identifying, where everything is. So that's our starting point.
I have one question.
Speaking of coloring, Jim had a comment that he wanted to make.
Dave, I was just going to suggest for the people on this committee that are not part of P&Z, it might make sense to define your R1L and your RMM and
I'd be happy to.
too, so that everybody's familiar with what.
Perhaps a glossary for that portion.
Yeah. So just as a quick overview, R1L is a site-built only zoning district. R1 allows for a mix of manufactured and site-built homes. I don't know whose phone that was going off. One of them. Our RCU is our rural designation. Allows for site-built or manufactured homes, but it changes kind of the animal counts or the animal abilities. It makes it more rural in nature. It's also a holding district across the county. It was the entire county is just about as RCU, and it was intended to be that holding district so that down the line, when a better idea came up and they went through a process, they could raise their hand and say, "Hey, I want to be this instead." And we could grant it. We had to designate the entire county as something, and that's what that was. R1, R2, RMM, and even RS to a certain extent really get into more dense, duplex, multifamily. They start getting into those realms a little bit. RS is a residential service, so that's our transition into commercial. The commercial, C1 is our least intensive commercial. That's your real estate office, your insurance type agent, those types of simple office type uses. C2 is a general commercial district. So, this is your grocery stores, you're a little more intense parking wise. C3 gets into a heavy commercial. C3 is also your sexually oriented businesses. That's the only category those are allowed there, and then industrial. But that's intensive. That's storage of things outside in public view. That's your rental facility for heavy equipment type stuff. PM is our performance manufacturing. Again, manufacturing district, as the title says, but it's more inside a building. These are your internal manufacturers. There may be some hazardous chemicals. And then as we go into M1 and M2, it's more intensive industrial. It's also more dangerous, potentially, industrial, more presence of chemicals, noxious odors, noise, those types of things. And that's kind of the progression. We start off small, then we go big. We have to create categories that try to encompass as much as possible. John?
Yeah, I'd like a little clarification here. We already have existing zoning ordinances, and you've listed under each of these districts may include X, Y, and Z. How does this, for example, at the P&Z Commission, if someone's asking to do a certain development, how does this play into their decision making? You mentioned the term character. Is this character of the neighborhood, and is that formalization of that so that someone can say it's not compatible?
It's formalization of the character of the neighborhood, but it really gets into as well the density. Right now, we have no density back at all. So, and I'll use Spring Creek Ranch as our example because that was just glaring at the end of the day. We have a community that is in that 0 to 1 dwelling units per acre. And then we had Spring Creek Ranch come in saying, hey, we want to be 12 dwelling units per acre. That has a massive increase in transportation, public services, everything else, not to mention it's not in character. This gives us the ability to have the maps where we can say, okay, look, Spring Creek Ranch, maybe you are 2 to 4. Maybe you're like Verde Lakes or Verde Santa Fe down the street. Maybe you're more like that. So we designate you as 2 to 4. There's your cap. That's 4. If you want to exceed that cap, and by the way, if we say that Spring Creek Ranch would be 4, they could apply for their zoning, go through the same public process at any time during the year. But if they wanted to go to 12, then they would have to go through a major general plan process. And that is only accepted one time a year. So it puts the pause button on the developers to say, oh, wait, we're going to be on the clock here for quite a while, paying interest or due diligence. Gives us the ability to say, okay, look, you are allowed to go up to here. The board and planning commission then can make a recommendation and approval to say, is this even appropriate? They have a much higher threshold now to look at. In a general plan or comprehensive plan amendment, we can look and say, what is the financial impact here? We can't take that into account on a normal zoning case. We get to say, look, what is your project going to cost the county at the end of the day? What are you going to provide? And it provides that additional framework for review at a much higher standard. Without having the density maps right now, I have no backstop to trigger a major comprehensive plan amendment. Even though we have the verbiage in there, it says if you change the density so much, then you have to do a major plan amendment. Well, there's no density. So
these classifications would actually be one thing that would be considered by the P&Z Commission in making a decision.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And the outreach for a major general plan amendment is much more significant than that is required for a zoning case. So there's a lot more, they're going to jump through a lot more hoops on it.
So would a change of classification automatically be a major?
It may or may not be. And when we get further down the line, we're going to talk about what triggers we would like to have in that.
Okay.
We could say that the trigger is more than 50 acres or, more than one district, your one density classification up or down. We can build that as we see fit down the line. And every community is different. I've seen some communities where it's a very low threshold. Man, you change 1 acre, boom, you're there, major general plan. And I've seen others where you're at 200 acres. It just really depends, but it gives us those tools to better effectively govern locally.
Okay, any other comments on proposed Yavapai County comprehensive land use classifications?
Were there any other questions? I made it as far as ag hospitality. Just walking through some of these others real quick. Public institutional, this is going to be our airports, fire departments, county buildings, city buildings if they happen to exist in county jurisdiction. Military facilities, I want to talk about this ever so briefly. We need to designate, per the state law, military areas. We don't have any that I'm aware of over in the Verde Valley, but we have major bombing ranges and everything else impacts on the western side of the county. So we need to be able to identify those. That's why the military facilities is there. It may be nothing more than we draw a giant ring around those military operation areas and say, you're going to have low-flying aircraft, you're going to have explosions, you're going to hear, cannons going off, and it is what it is. And then lastly, because we have so much state, federal, land that is outside our jurisdiction, we're just going to color all of those things that we have no jurisdiction over, some color, and designate the forests and everything basically as one entity, one type of color. So with that, does anybody have any questions? If we're good to go with that, if we could do a quick vote on that, Chairman.
Okay, well,
Can I have permission?
first of all, I want to make sure everybody, all their questions have been answered, all their comments have been made. And if they have, then I would just like to see a simple show of hands for everybody who would like to move forward with this.
Okay.
I think we're good to go. Okay, the last item we have under new business is discussion of alternative meeting days to accommodate ex officio member attendance. I think there's one specific group that we have in mind.
Yes.
So
Yes.
David, if you could.
Absolutely, and I'm going to actually hand this off to Supervisor Michaels here pretty quick, but we have a request from the Yavapai Apache Nation. They have a conflict, and we've already designated them in previous meetings as being ex officio members of this body. They have a conflict on meeting days, and Supervisor Michaels, if you don't mind jumping in here, because you've had those discussions.
Sure. So their nation's council forever meets on a Thursday, which eliminates the ability for leadership to be here. And so if we could pick another day or be open to that, that allows a conversation to occur at a leadership level. And that's the level of participation I certainly am advocating for to be represented on this body. But Thursday is not a possibility.
So the questions are, could we move our meetings to another day, or is there another way that we could accommodate them?
I think they'd be very interested if it was another day of the week. Then I know that means we all have to look at our dreaded calendars, and yet I will say to you that this is a unique opportunity for us to really have a voice, an invited voice from the Yavapai Apache Nation join us, and I urge us to the best of our ability, give that consideration serious thought.
And if I may throw out here, Mr. Chairman, from the staff point of view, I'll go ahead and speak for both of our commissioners and both of our supervisors here. The first and third week of the month, I will say right now, are probably completely off limits due to other meetings. Staff has commitments on the second Tuesday of the month. And when is BOA? I can never remember.
It's the third week of the month. So
Is it what day though?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay. So if we stay in that second full week, basically in between the board meetings, Tuesday is the only day that staff is not available. I'm in court every month with a hearing officer supporting our code enforcement. So it would be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday doesn't work, or Friday.
Dave, just from my perspective, we're asking 10 people to change their busy schedules plus staff to accommodate one entity. It doesn't make sense to me. I apologize.
Well, if I could just speak to that, I sure hear you. I'm juggling schedules as much as I possibly can. I will add this, that I'm missing right now my mayor's and town managers meeting, which is a regularly scheduled meeting on this time and day as well, and also my Verde Front meeting as supervisor. So it is not only for the Yavapai Apache Nation, though from my heart, I will say to you, that's my first consideration. I think it does behoove us at this stage of the game, particularly as we're looking at an update of the vision for our future county, that we do our best to include them in the conversation at a leadership level, and they are interested in that. So I hear you, and I still urge us to give that some serious consideration. I don't make this request lightly, of course.
I will say that my calendar is so tight that it's very difficult for me to imagine moving this to another day, personally. But I wonder if they could identify some other options for us to include their representation.
I will take that back. As I said, and I perhaps didn't say as clearly, I was hoping we would get, as clearly as I should have, I was hoping we could get at a leadership level. I suspect that we can get a designee, but, I always like to shoot for the stars and land on the moon. And so if we can get a chair of the Apache Nation, for example, or his designee, that it would be at a very high level. The challenge is that it is the council meeting, and so usually at a high level they're all there. And so it's because we want expertise, particularly, for example, as it relates to water. And I have that in mind I know we're going to have a hydrologist, but I also know that there's a great depth of knowledge and experience as it relates to water use with our Yavapai Apache Nation, and they can really add and benefit the conversation. But I will continue to pursue other options if that's the pleasure of the board, or committee, but I have to tell you that I'm going to personally have to make some decisions also in juggling my responsibilities. It's tough.
Yes, it is.
I hear you.
Well,
That's a tough question.
Let me ask a question, because I also appreciate moving 10 schedules for one, but appreciate the fact that it's important to have the Yavapai Apache Nation present if they're available. Their meetings are in the morning, I believe. They're council meetings. Do they?
Yeah, your mic.
My mic is on. My mic.
I apologize.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm almost never quiet, but but they are not available for the day is the bottom line, that's an impossible day because of council business, though the meeting part of it is in the morning.
Well, anyways, my thought is if they could provide some other potential options for us to make this work without anyone having to adjust their schedules, that'd be fantastic. And we could perhaps just move this to our next meeting as a discussion item again with more information.
Yeah, I'd be happy to include this on our next agenda, Mr. Chairman.
No, I appreciate that consideration.
Do you think does that work for everybody generally? I'll take just the nodding of the heads.
I will keep pushing this string up the hill, I
Okay, good.
promise.
So that's going to be something that's going to be on our next agenda for our next meeting, which is also subject for discussion today. I believe.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I can jump in here real quick on this topic. Given staff workloads, given where we're at with this, what I would like to recommend is that we skip the next meeting, and then meeting in 2 months, we should have written elements for energy and environmental in draft form to be able to bring forward to start talking about.
So this would be the second Thursday in.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I can't even open a calendar over here. Sorry, I'm having computer problems. So we would be looking at September 9th. Whoops. Yeah, it looks like we would be looking at September 9th for that meeting.
Okay, so once again, I'm just kind of looking back and forth, and how does everybody feel about that? Okay, I see thumbs up, nodding heads.
Yes, it's already on our calendars.
so-
I'm just proposing to cancel next month so that we can take that time and prepare for just continuing to write those elements and at least get a couple of the elements forward to you for consideration. Your minding just blocked
Sorry.
out.
Typically, that's a good problem to have from this perspective, but, yeah, okay, good, so.
Great.
Well, let's see, what's the, next up, we have the upcoming, under other business, we have the upcoming items of interest for the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. David, I believe that's yours.
I honestly, I wasn't even thinking in those terms. I apologize. I know upcoming items right now. I know we're meeting in Verde Valley Property Owners Association here next month. We're continuing, our outreach. What we've already talked about, I'll be following up with Jim Fortney for Williamson Valley Property Owners Association, and we'll see if we can't get a couple of these other communities engaged here a little bit. I will say we're updating the website as we get stuff in. If any of your community groups have anything they want to add, if they want to put surveys up, have them send it in to us. We'll get those posted for them as soon as possible and do a blast out on our list for everybody to help leverage our mailing lists against their mailing lists as well. So just let us know.
Thank you. And then item number 2, I'm responsible for, the roundtable for committee members for any topics not included on the agenda. I don't want anyone to feel muted. I want to give everybody an opportunity to really be able to discuss any item that they think is important that isn't currently on the agenda or, that we haven't looked at. So if I could just run down the row, basically starting with Connie, and see, Connie, if you have any suggestions, anything that you haven't seen on the agenda or any items that we haven't discussed that you'd like to see.
I think, in kind of a unofficial polling of a lot of, my different business affiliates and stuff, just to make everybody aware, I think the number one topic, at least for us in Prescott, is, and I think it would be helpful, and we're also urging the city of Prescott to take part in it, and I know some of the candidates have been talking heavily about it, is a massive plan for traffic control. And I think that regionally, the county needs to be very involved in that, either by way of, financial support or, the concept-driven. We need to get ahead of this curve because I technically, I think we're probably behind the curve now, but if we could do some more talking and more, discussing some kind of a long-term or a short-term plan for planning.
Well,
I would just have to say the traffic is important.
And I'll just say, I know Public Works is working on that, and by you talking today about that, I know Vinny with Simpo will put his Simpo hat back on. I'm sure he'll take that to heart as well on the transportation planning side. So,
thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. Mary, do you have anything?
I don't have anything.
Okay. How about you, John?
I had a couple of items. One of them is that I've been looking at these vision statements. I think you said you received 3 of them. I know there's some more in the works. They're a gold mine for ideas for survey questions.
yes, they are.
And I would like to see the planning department go through those, and we talked about follow-on surveys. We could take those because they're asking them in their local neighborhoods, but it would be nice to know how people feel across the county. So that's one of them. The other, you mentioned that you were going to be drafting first drafts of the elements. Okay?
Yes.
I would like to see those made available to the public for comment. not just brought in here, but I think in the spirit of engaging the public, post them and invite them to submit.
I would actually like to get it through this body first before we go ahead and provide anything out on the public side for, survey comment or anything like that.
I don't have a problem with that, but my concern is that I don't want the public to be just told, here it is, do you like it or not? And
No.
in fact, they're not going to vote on it because the Board of Supervisors. So, I mean, we could go through this whole process where we develop the surveys, we review them, we post them, and then they're used to write the comprehensive plan, and the Board of Supervisors approves them, and the residents never had an opportunity to say, here's one of my concerns, or, so we need to engage the public more.
No, I don't disagree. I just, my preference would be to go ahead and get them in draft format, get it to this body for, adjustment, fine tuning, comments, and then when we have a final draft out of this body, then that's the time that we go ahead and put those out to the public. I'd like to have more of a shinier copy going out to the public for their comment at that point. The comprehensive plan is unique. General plans in cities, other than attending meetings and filling out surveys, the only comment the citizens there even have is to vote. It's a little different in that the board approves our comprehensive plan, but we're trying to get the outreach as best we can, but I don't want to put something that is very, very preliminary out to the public. I just have never found success with that.
I understand that. I'm just saying that, well, for example, as a member of this committee, receiving, for example, an element 6 days before the meeting and having to go through and give my feedback, I'm going to need probably more time than that to really study it and provide my inputs. So I want a more of an opportunity, not only for us, but for the residents of the county to be able to comment.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, John. My only comment is that I plan to place this item on the agenda every time we meet.
And it will continue to stay.
Okay, good. So, well, wonderful. That's fine. Jim, do you have anything?
No.
Okay, moving right down the line. Donna? Okay, continuing on. Joseph?
I do.
Your mic,
Please.
Mic on, please.
Sorry. So, under upcoming, or under other business, upcoming items of interest was brought up, and you brought this up, and Mr. Black brought this up, where you guys were talking about vision statement for Sedona, Cottonwood, Camp Verde, and so on. I want to get a feel for maybe between you guys. What level of engagement have you seen from, say, Chino Valley, Ash Fork, Paulden? I know Williamson Valley seems like there's some contention there.
There's some contention in Williamson Valley. I have tried reaching out multiple times to Ash Fork and have gotten no response at all. We've got maybe a little bit of traction in the Seligman area. We actually have a county staff member, doesn't work in my department, but she acts as a very good community representative up there in the library district, and she's been trying to help spearhead and get some people to come together. These are communities traditionally that are very hard to bring together. So, we're trying to help those groups out as best we can. Same thing with Paco, trying to get Paco involved, which is Paulden area community group. We're trying, we're not getting engagement. People are not interested.
What kind of, is it some kind of pushback? Is it something that you say that offends them? You know what I mean?
No, what a lot of these communities have been is more of a social club. It's more of they want to get together, they want to talk about a few items, but they're not engaged for these types of purposes. Even though they're a community organization, they're not engaged around planning, they're not engaged around these topics, so it's difficult to get the traction going to really get the help. We're going to continue, I'm expecting in the fall we'll be having a lot of meetings with the individual supervisors and those groups, and I'm hoping in the fall we can get a little more traction there, but right now we're just not getting it.
Is that something that I could be involved in?
Absolutely.
Could you send me any information pertaining to this get together? You say you're going to have.
Absolutely. I haven't seen
get a feel for what what their headspace is.
You bet. I haven't seen the District 4 meeting schedule yet for the fall, but usually they try to get to all of those individual community groups at least once or twice in the fall. We just haven't seen that yet. It hasn't been published to us. So as soon as we get those, absolutely we can.
Yeah, send it my way. I want to.
David, can I make a comment on that? I brought this up also in one of our first meetings. I've been into a lot of these communities, and I know, again, because of my background in development, these people truly just want to be left alone. And when you come as an official from the county, they all run. They don't know what it's going to be all about. It's a lot of fear. But as I brought up in the first meeting, that is up to the county to market this, and it's all in the way this is marketed. Instead of becoming a threat and seeing the county as a threat, that's got to be turned around with marketing, and there's got to be a budget for marketing to be able to present this in the right way. Instead of it being fearful, they can protect their community by getting involved. Instead of allowing this to organically develop with no planning, the county is trying to make an attempt to get some planning to prevent the encroachment of certain things in certain communities. And I believe it's all in the presentation. When I see a county official walking on one of my projects, I get in my car and leave because I don't want to deal with the crap, to be honest with you. And that is exactly what happens in these communities. They like it just the way it is. They don't want to be involved, but they don't understand that by getting ahead of it, the problems, the potential problems, they can actually preserve their community. So I think that's where the county is failing. I really do. And I'm not saying it's your responsibility, David.
Not at all.
But this thing needs to be marketed and presented to the farmer down the street with one tractor he's had his entire life. You got to remember who you're approaching and how you approach these people. It's very intimidating for them. And I think that's the reason. I really do.
Connie, I if I may, would love to speak to that. First, I think you make a very good point. It is, as an elected official, my responsibility, and I will take the weight for that. I mean it when I say I want to hear what matters to you. By the way, I make great brownies. So I will bring them to you, and maybe you won't run away when you see me.
Supervisor, why is this the first I'm hearing of this?
There were none left.
What's in those brownies?
There were none left. So you're right, absolutely. But I think you're seeing, as evidenced by this committee, a recognition of that challenge. That's why we're meeting. And we have to, and I'm getting ready to do it in concert with David and his staff, whatever that date is, for a residential area of some 10 to 14,000, depending what numbers you believe, people. And to reach out in a in-person way, and I've already met with them several times, but this is going to take time. We have an ocean liner to turn, folks, because people feel, rightly or wrongly, that they haven't been heard. And it's not just solely on, of course, an elected official's shoulder. It's on all of our shoulders, and Sandy, you and I were talking about it. We have to re-engage as communities. We have to begin to have these discussions in authentic, collaborative, respectful ways. And so I take that charge that you give me seriously, and I promise to work.
Well, Donna, and let me just clarify something. The way you present this, or anybody, I'm not just saying you, I'm just using that as a term, the way it is presented to each individual community will be taken completely different. For example, where I'm in Prescott has a life of its own. It's moving forward. It's fine. We've got zoning. I'm primarily concerned with your districts, the rural districts, Kirkland, Wilhoit. I mean, all the areas, not Wilhoit, what do you call it up there? The Yarnell. Those are the people that I think need to be brought in most of all, because they will be affected most of all with any changes.
Well, I hear you. One example, and of course I'm not going to speak for Supervisor Oberg, he can do that beautifully. But, this whole idea of where we put paths and trails connecting to our forest, that's a huge conversation that's being had on this side of the mountain right now because of the damage that is being done and the quality of life that is being damaged by those who live in those residential areas close to these trailheads or pathways going into the forest. And so as you move into development of those areas, that's going to be critically important. So what we're doing right now and engaging them and gaining, first you have to earn that trust, but to have those conversations I think is critically important. It's why, we're going to go out in person. And I know that Supervisor Oberg has been doing the same thing, but it's going to take some time. And again, I won't speak for him, but there is another piece of this that I do want to raise, and it may be that I just need the education. While I understand that our comprehensive plan updating, and thank you, Joseph, because you reminded me to say it, is about the unincorporated areas primarily. I think we have a responsibility because we're not silos, to speak to what you're talking about, Connie. We're not islands. Whether you're incorporated or not, if you're a city or a municipality or a town, you're going to be impacted by what this work's product is. And I hope at some point along the way here, we engage in at least a formal way of respect in conversation with the city of Cottonwood for input, in conversation with Sedona, with our incorporated communities, so that we are looking at a region and not forgetting that though they've got their plans in place, what we do with a comprehensive plan is going to impact their lives and their communities. And so we should not only reach out to the communities you were identifying, Connie, accurately, but also the ones that we already know that have wonderful planning documents in hand.
Thank you, Donna. Sandra, I don't want you to think you've been forgotten. Mic on, please. Mic on.
Everything that everybody said, I would concur with.
Good. Well, that was easy.
I do have one suggestion, though, that you might think about. What if we as a group would have individual meetings with individual town planners, town managers, and just sit down informally in a roundtable discussion and get some feedback from them?
Well, and as Supervisor Michaels already alluded to, this is a county document. State law basically includes the cities, the schools, all the other jurisdictions for a 60-day public comment period at the end. I think what I'd want to do is put a draft out to them, but I'll be honest, none of them have ever included us at their table at this stage of the game for any of their plans, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just not the way the process is lined out in state law. State law says we provide it to them in a 60-day comment period towards the end during the review process, and they can provide their comments at that point. I'm concerned about the cities, quite frankly, wanting to take a leadership role or provide comments very early on that may be contrary to county interests, trying to bring their agendas forward. So my job sitting in this seat is to protect the county's interests first. Okay. So that would be my only comment.
Thank you, David.
And we have a couple more members online here.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I don't want them to be forgotten today.
Yeah, no, I don't want. Well, why don't we go ahead? First of all, Vincent, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Thanks for not forgetting about me, Dave. Appreciate it. And thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to note, heard Connie's comment earlier about traffic, and my office works primarily in the central Yavapai area. We'll continue to work with all of greater Yavapai County and really appreciate being a part of this committee and this group. Central Yavapai MPO looks at primarily the Quad City area, but Yavapai County has membership in that. So Supervisor Craig Brown sits on our executive board, and Public Works Director Dan Sherry sits on our technical committee. And we continue to have regional discussions that absolutely will overlap into this group. And I'm with Connie, would like to see, future discussions as it relates to the greater transportation network, traffic, and most especially funding. We continue to squeeze the best we can, but we're really facing some real challenges. And I know the county's talked about that before, and it was in the survey that kind of, if you will, retreating to more of a maintenance mode because, really unable to afford some expansion projects and modernization projects. And, I think as a region, we do really well working together, but there's going to need to continue to be some harder discussions. And this is on a national level, it's on a state level, and of course a local level, but it does directly impact what we're able to do. And it requires engagement of the citizens. It requires, again, I know we're talking a lot about marketing, period, but same thing with transportation. It's one of the services that everyone truly uses. We all have complaints about it and try and find solutions. So I do think it's another opportunity through this comprehensive plan to continue to educate, to engage the public, help them to understand, if you will, some of the real challenges we face and how they might be a part of that in some way. So all that to say, I appreciate being a part of this and look forward to some more transportation, traffic related dialogue. And it's, again, multimodal. I know we've talked about bicycle, pedestrian, and public transit. So that would be my only note at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Harry, are you still with us? Okay, that's well, in that case, the last item we have is call to the public. I don't know if we have any public to call to, but so why don't we say going once? Okay. Oh, good. Mr. Bonk, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Thomas Bonk. I live in Rimrock. I'm the vice president of Beaver Creek Community Association. And I just have to say that the public outreach, the public participation of this committee is sorely lacking. Why is there not a forum or a subcommittee for each element from the public to work on these issues? And instead of the questions being developed by staff, why are they not developed by the public? A subcommittee or a focus group. I know there's open meeting laws that may apply, but if you just ask for the public participation, I think you would get it. The survey questions. There is no link to the current surveys on the county website. It takes a bit of searching just to find the agenda for this meeting. There just isn't the public participation outreach for this committee. Thank you.
Sure, Thomas, before you jump off.
Hold on just a second, Mr. Chairman. Because this is called to the public, the appointed body cannot comment on comments made by the public. It's not agendized. So I just want to preface that before any answers
I wasn't going to comment. I was just going to ask for him if he could provide some examples of improved outreach. But
I think that's appropriate if we wanted to do that briefly, but we just cannot engage on call of the public for items that are
That's fine. So Thomas, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, could you provide some examples of improved outreach?
Well, first start with making this committee and its agendas and its meeting notice more publicly accessible. It's hidden on the county website. Same with the survey questions. I mean, get that up in front of the public instead of hidden under a different web domain even. You do send it out to the community associations to, disseminate this information through their residents, but not all community associations and not all communities have that level of technology or expertise or communication to reach all of their residents. The county really needs to do a better job at disseminating this information.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments.
The only thing I'll throw in here, Mr. Chairman, is all the agendas are posted on the county's meeting portal, which is all of the meetings that the county holds, all the public meetings. They're advertised in our lobbies. That's all been taken care of. And subcommittees, as he addressed, the board has already addressed that and provided direction on no subcommittees being created. Additionally, we have a website, planningyavapai2032.org, which we have been advertising and pushing out there specific to this project. And that's all we have.
Okay, thank you for your comments. At this point, I believe I'm going to call for adjournment if there are no further comments, questions, etc. We're adjourned. Thank you.
And I show for the record 12:56.